He actually pointed a gun at me, standing right there on my own front porch, demanding to know if I had a permit to breathe the air in his precious little neighborhood. I didn't even flinch, I just smiled, because he didn't know the quiet woman sipping coffee was the one person in this entire county he absolutely shouldn't have been messing with. I'm Ava Sterling, and I was the sheriff, the real sheriff of this whole forgotten county. And that little suburban tyrant had just handed me my first case since getting shot. It all started about a month after I bought the place out on Ironwood Creek Ranch. It was this quiet, forgotten patch of land tucked between two dusty canyons. The only sounds were the birds, the rustle of the creek, and the low, comforting bray of my mule, Copper. After 22 years in uniform, most of it spent in big city chaos, chasing every kind of monster you can imagine, I wanted out. I needed silence. I needed to heal. My hip still ached from the last surgery, and my ribs were a roadmap of the last raid. But it wasn't the pain that was the problem. It was the silence that followed. No badge, no precinct, no team, just a long, lonely medical leave in this old fixer-upper ranch I'd fallen completely in love with. I was outside, wrestling with a stubborn gate post one humid Tuesday when he first rolled up. It wasn't a car or even a truck, just a faded, sputtering electric golf cart, bouncing up my gravel driveway like it was pulling into a VIP parking spot. The man behind the wheel, well, he looked like a character straight out of a bad cop movie that nobody watched. Aviator sunglasses that were definitely too big for his face, black cargo shorts, and a combat-style vest with the word Enforcer peeling off in cracked white vinyl. A plastic badge, maybe from a party store, was clipped right to his chest. I paused, pipe wrench in hand, and he rolled to a stop, idling dramatically. He squinted at me over the frames. "You the new resident at Lot 19?" he asked, already sizing me up like I was a problem he was about to solve with a clipboard. I just nodded once. He sighed, deep and theatrical, like my simple confirmation had somehow offended the very foundation of his fragile existence. "Your driveway is a violation," he declared, without a single hello or welcome to the neighborhood. HOA policy mandates stamped concrete or pavers, not loose quarry gravel. "And that gate. It's 3 inches too tall, Sterling. Plus the equine, is that a horse trailer? I saw it around the back," I blinked. "No welcome wagon. No helpful tips about the best local diner. Just a verbal ticket book being thrown in my face." I glanced past him to the barn. Copper, my old mule, who is gentler than a Sunday morning, peeked his long ears over the paddock fence, curious about the sputtering intruder. You can't keep livestock within 50 feet of a residence. The guy, who I now saw was named Barry Dalton on his laminated tag, recited, clearly reading from some imaginary script in his head. "She's a therapy animal," I stated completely deadpan. And honestly, she was. She was better therapy than anything I'd gotten from the county. Barry didn't ask what I was being treated for. He just leaned in closer, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial growl. "This is your first and only verbal warning. Next time I will be forced to issue formal citations." "For what exactly?" I asked. He gave me this tight little smirk. "For violation of community harmony." I almost laughed. I nearly fell over laughing, but then his hand, slow and deliberate, drifted down to the holster on his hip, and I saw it wasn't a cheap plastic prop. It was a functioning 9mm sidearm in a worn nylon holster. That was the moment it stopped being funny and became genuinely concerning. This wasn't just a guy playing dress-up. This was a man who truly believed that cheap vest gave him the right to threaten people. "You are going to draw on a neighbor," I said, my voice dropping lower, holding steady, over a mule and some gravel. He hesitated, maybe realizing for the first time that the line between cosplay and crime was getting very blurry. But instead of backing down, he puffed his chest out and said something even stupider. "Just showing I'm not afraid to enforce the law here, ma'am." "What law?" He tapped the plastic badge. "Ironwood Creek homeowners regulations." I just stared at him. Then I looked down at the coffee mug still warm in my hand. "Then back up." "Barry," I said softly, letting the name hang there. "Have you ever been arrested for impersonating a law enforcement officer?" He blinked. The question hit him like a physical blow. He scoffed, trying to regain control. "Watch yourself, lady," he hissed. "Some of us have connections." He reversed his golf cart so fast it kicked up a cloud of dust that almost swallowed him whole. Copper snorted with what sounded suspiciously like derision. I waited until he was completely gone before exhaling. I then walked over to the old pickup parked by the barn, reached into the glove box and pulled out my real badge. It was heavy, silver, and still read, Sheriff Ava Sterling. I traced the engraving with my thumb. I hadn't come here to flash this. I had come here to hide it. But Barry Dalton had just turned my quiet porch into an active crime scene. And a law enforcement officer, even one on medical leave, doesn't walk away from that. The next few days were quiet, but I noticed the subtle aggression. A neon pink sticker on my mailbox. Non-compliant structure. A printout taped to my barn door of copper grazing. Labeled, unauthorized livestock. Violation pending. The HOA meeting flyers appeared on neon paper, but with no contact number, only an address. The Dalton residence. I drove past their house once. It was plastic perfect. Stamped concrete driveway. 2 fake stone lions flanking the immaculate garage. A fountain with colored LED lights. Trina Dalton, Kerren's wife, stood watering a patch of obviously silk hydrangeas, while Barry patrolled the sidewalk in his uniform, looking like he was guarding the green zone. I also started seeing how the real residents lived. I waved at an old woman named Doris down the street. She quickly dropped her hand and avoided eye contact, but not before giving me a quick, desperate nod. Her fence was collapsing, her window trim was peeling, and her tiny garden was dying. It looked like the Claymores had fined her into pure, exhausted surrender. I started collecting data. Photos, video, audio, timestamps, every piece of fake warning. I realized I needed to understand the rules before I broke them. Turns out Trina ran the HOA with the charm of a prison warden. Her rules were constant, arbitrary, and often cruel. One guy was fined for his choice of window blinds. Another threatened for repainting his mailbox without written consent. Consent that was, of course, never issued. The biggest discovery? They weren't a registered HOA. 0 filings with the state, no publicly available records, no transparent budget. Just a private Facebook group and a lot of cultivated fear. Barry showed up again 2 days later. He walked this time, but still wore the vest, the badge, and the sidearm. "You've been warned," he said, puffing out his chest. "You have 72 hours to comply or vacate." "Vacate what?" I asked. "This neighborhood." I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving his. "Are you threatening me again, Barry?" He grinned, a thin reptilian smile. That's when I saw Doris peeking through her blinds across the street. I smiled back, not at Barry, but at Doris at the moment. "You got a radio?" I asked Barry. He nodded slowly, confused. "Good," I said, turning back to my porch. "Make sure it's charged. You're going to be hearing from someone soon." "Who?" I took a long, exaggerated sip of my coffee, looked him over and said, "The sheriff." And for the first time since that bullet took me down, I felt like Ava Sterling again. The next morning, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the quiet before the inevitable storm. Around 9:30 a.m. I heard it, the whine of electric motors. Not one but 2 golf carts. One was Barry's battered red one. The second was sleek black with a magnetic decal that read, HOA Enforcement Unit 2. I swear I almost choked on my coffee. Barry stepped out, flanked by a younger guy. Tall, slick-back hair, mirrored shades, and a vest that said Assistant Officer. They parked with a confidence that only comes from profound, deep-seated delusion. "You were told to comply," Barry announced, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "And you brought backup for a mule in a gravel path?" I replied, taking another slow, deliberate sip. "This is serious," he insisted. "You're under review for multiple violations, including improper driveway construction and unsanctioned animal storage." Animal storage. I love that. "Assistant Officer Kyle here is documenting everything for citation," he added. Kyle immediately snapped a photo of my boot. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. "You find this funny, Sterling?" "I find you hilarious, Barry. You're cosplaying as a lawman while committing civil infractions. You do know that impersonating an officer is a felony, right?" I don't need to impersonate anything, he shouted. The HOA vested me with full authority to enforce community law. Where is that law written down, Barry? Show me the charter. Show me the bylaws. Show me anything besides those dollar store badges and the printouts in your cheap clipboard. That moment of hesitation, that pause was everything. He snapped his fingers at Kyle. Issue the citations. Move to formal warning stage. They started plastering my door and mailbox with slips of paper labeled Notice of Non-Compliance. No logo, no legal references, just absurd. Manufactured violations like unapproved porch furniture color and wind chimes creating audible disharmony. I watched them. Calm. Quiet. Then I walked over, peeled every single one off, folded them neatly, and dropped them into the compost bin right in front of them. Barry's face turned deep crimson. You think this is a joke, but you will see what happens when people defy authority. Oh, I said with my own sweet smile. I'm counting on it. That night I went dark. No uniform, just jeans and a windbreaker. I walked the neighborhood. Every house showed the same signs. Fear, resentment, windows closing quickly when I looked up. Yards that were once vibrant were now bare and dead, fined into lifeless conformity. Barry and Trina had been squeezing this place dry for years. I knocked on Doris's door. She opened it just a crack, then wider when she realized it was me. You okay? I asked. They've been after you since day one, she whispered. 5 years, Ava. Ever since Trina decided she didn't want renters or outsiders or people with opinions, she invited me in. Her house smelled like cinnamon and thyme. On the kitchen table, she had a ledger, old flyers, photocopies. I kept copies of everything, she said. HOA fees collected, fines issued. The money just vanished. We sat there for 2 hours, page after page of inconsistencies. People charged $300 for painting a fence the HOA didn't even own. Fines issued weekly for not having matching patio cushions. Doris had handwritten notes for everything. She had been their victim, but she was also my star witness. Then she handed me a folder. I wasn't going to show you this, she said, but I think I trust you now. Inside were photocopies of checks made out to Trina Dalton, Living Solutions, and another envelope which she'd pulled from Trina's trash, internal memos. One literally said, use intimidation where necessary to ensure compliance. The financial records were the smoking gun. Trina was moving HOA funds directly into her personal business account. According to the state code, which I had just pulled up 2 days prior, any personal use of those funds without a board vote was straight-up embezzlement. This is enough to press charges, I said quietly. Doris nodded. We need a pattern, a bigger picture. They'll deny it all, so we built the timeline. Every bogus citation, every disappearing payment. Kerren issued the violation. Barry collected the fine and the cash vanished. It wasn't mismanagement. It was calculated theft under the guise of fake authority. I scanned every document, emailing copies to myself and a separate, anonymous set to an old contact in the county legal office. I wrote, more evidence to follow. The next afternoon, I saw Trina sitting on her perfect porch, sipping wine like a queen, surveying her kingdom. She smiled when she saw me. Afternoon, neighbor. It's been educational, I replied. We run a tight ship here, she said, tilting her head. Rules are rules. Without structure, a community falls apart. Structure is necessary. I agreed. Abuse of power isn't. Her smile faltered. I walked off without another word. She already felt it. The predator suddenly felt the weight of being watched. That night, I called Officer Miller, Deputy Knox in the old days. I told him I needed one last favor. Bring a body cam, I said. I want a third-party witness when I show them everything. The stage was set. The neighborhood mandatory community barbecue was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. Only Barry and Trina would turn potato salad into a legal threat. I knew what this was. It wasn't about hot dogs, it was a stage for their final performance. I arrived 15 minutes early. Jeans, a plain black shirt, no badge in sight. Barry was there, pacing in his full uniform. Tactical vest, fake badge, the whole absurd getup. Decided to show up, Sterling? He sneered. Wouldn't miss it. Wouldn't go with the dress code, I replied, gesturing to his vest. He frowned and walked away. Trina stepped up, her smile so tight it looked painful. We're hoping this can be a productive gathering, neighbor. Are we grilling or grilling people? I asked. Her smile wobbled before she clapped her hands and called everyone to attention. Barry pulled out his clipboard. We've had reports of non-compliant properties disrupting neighborhood harmony. This includes unauthorized livestock and interactions with outside law enforcement that do not align with HOA protocol. He didn't use my name, but he didn't have to. Trina added, "We will now take a vote on whether to issue a formal HOA strike against the offending property. 3 strikes could lead to enforced removal under community guidelines." Doris raised her hand. "What guidelines, Trina? Show me one document that's legally binding." Trina dismissed her with a wave. "This is an open mic night." Barry stepped forward, holding up a slip of paper. "We've issued a second warning to the new resident at Lot 19. If she refuses to comply, we may have no choice but to escalate." That was my cue. I stood up and walked toward him slowly. "Escalate how, Barry?" He didn't answer. He just nervously adjusted the strap on his vest. Trina cut in. "Compliance ensures peace. Those who refuse may face consequences." "What kind of consequences, Barry?" I asked again, standing right in front of him. His hand rested subtly on his holster. It was a reflex, a threat he couldn't stop. He was doing it in front of 30 witnesses. "You going to pull that in front of a neighborhood barbecue?" I asked. People gasped and backed away. "You threatening me again?" He said nothing. He just took one step forward, fingers twitching near the grip. I moved faster than anyone expected. The old muscle memory kicked in. I grabbed his wrist, pinned it against his hip, and yanked the entire holster rig off his belt in one smooth motion. He staggered back, disoriented. I tossed the gun, the holster, and the belt onto the table, right next to the lukewarm hot dogs. Clang! "You're done, Barry," I said. Trina shrieked. "You assaulted an officer." "No," I said very calmly, letting the silence of the crowd do the heavy lifting. "I disarmed a man impersonating one." Officer Miller stepped out from the side of the house, badge gleaming, body cam blinking bright red. "Got it all, Sheriff," he said. Trina spun around, seeing the uniform. "This is harassment. This is an invasion of privacy." "No, Trina," I said, stepping past Barry and facing the neighbors. "This is justice." I pulled out my wallet, slow and deliberate, and flipped it open. The silver badge caught the sunlight. Sheriff Riley Mays. The shock was absolute. Trina's jaw literally dropped. Barry looked like a puddle that forgot how to hold its shape. "You've all been living under threats and fake authority," I announced to the silent crowd. "There is no legal HOA here. Your fees have been stolen. Your rights have been trampled." "But not anymore," Knox grinned. "You want to do the honors?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's give them one last chance to hang themselves." We walked away, leaving Barry crawling out of the plastic kiddie pool full of canned soda he'd tripped into, and Trina standing alone, clutching her useless clipboard. The county investigation moved like wildfire after that. Public notices went up declaring the Ironwood Creek Homeowners Association an unregistered, unrecognized body with zero legal authority. The walls came down fast. People who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices. One neighbor, whose shed had been padlocked by Barry, told me he'd paid over $8,000 in fake violation fees. Doris became a neighborhood hero, standing outside her house every afternoon, giving out copies of her ledger and sharing her story. The fear was gone. A week later, Barry Dalton was officially charged with impersonating an officer and unlawful use of a firearm. Trina's assets were frozen pending the embezzlement and fraud investigation. I walked into the courthouse for the hearing in my full uniform, badge polished, every crease sharp. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors filled the rows, Doris front and center. Trina looked frail and small. Barry stared at the floor. When the prosecutor asked why I hadn't stopped them sooner, I looked out at the crowded courtroom. "Because fear," I said, "is a hard thing to erase. I needed the people of Ironwood Creek to see that they weren't alone. I needed them to see that justice was real, and that when they stood up, the law would stand with them." Doris spoke too. Her voice was strong now. She told the court how they were bullied, how they were made to feel worthless in their own homes. The judge listened, then denied bail for Barry. As I walked out of the courthouse, I paused on the steps. I was back in uniform, back on the job, but this felt different. This wasn't about chasing a phantom menace. It was about protecting a home. A week later, I came home to find a small group of neighbors putting up a new wooden sign where the old HOA bulletin board used to be. It said, "Welcome to Ironwood Creek, under new protection." And beneath it, in clean block letters, "Protected by the sheriff herself." I stood there watching them hammer it into the ground, a lump in my throat. No more fake power. No more fake citations. Just law, real law, and peace. I had come here to hide, to heal, to find quiet. But what I found was a reason to put the badge back on. They thought they could run a neighborhood with fear. They thought a plastic vest and a loud voice could replace justice. But fear has a limit. The truth doesn't. Now, every time I look down my street, I see more than houses. I see resilience. I see courage. I see a community that took its voice back. And I see a mule named Copper, grazing peacefully in the paddock. The safest damn mule in the whole county. Let me know what you think. In a situation like this, is it ever right to break a little law, like trespassing or taking something from the trash, to expose a massive injustice? Should a sheriff on leave have interfered at all? Or should she have just called the police from day one? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts on where the line between right and wrong truly sits.